The verdict and the plan. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Federation gleamed under the light of 7 artificial suns, its crystalline dome refracting rainbow patterns across the faces of 342 species representatives. Ambassador Cassandra Way stood at the center of the chamber, her expression carefully neutral as the final votes were tallied on the massive holographic display that hovered above them all. "The motion carries with an overwhelming majority," announced High Counselor Trigax, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of distress in his species that few humans could recognize. "The Federation hereby declares humanity a destabilizing influence and potential threat to galactic peace. All human activities will be restricted to the Sol system for a probationary period of 700 Federation cycles." 700 cycles, nearly 800 Earth years. Ambassador Way nodded once, her posture rigid in her formal diplomatic attire. "Humanity acknowledges the Federation's decision," she said, her voice steady despite the sentence just passed on her entire species. "We request the standard 40-cycle implementation period to recall our citizens and vessels." High Counselor Trigax's secondary membrane slid across his eyes, a gesture of mild surprise. He had clearly expected protest, outrage, perhaps even threats. The humans had proven remarkably adaptable since joining the Federation 70 Earth years ago, but they were also known for their emotional reactions. "Granted," Trigax responded. "The Enforcement Division will oversee the implementation and establish the quarantine barrier at the conclusion of the 40 cycles." As Way and her small delegation exited the Assembly Hall, her senior aide, Dr. Raj Patel, leaned close. "They actually did it," he whispered, barely containing his anger. "After everything we've contributed. The quantum communication network alone." "Quiet," Way interrupted, her eyes forward. "Not here." They boarded their shuttle in silence, passing clusters of Federation representatives who quickly moved aside, some watching with what looked like regret, others with obvious satisfaction. Once the cabin doors sealed behind them, and security sweeps confirmed no surveillance, Way finally relaxed her shoulders. "Send the signal," she ordered. "Operation Diaspora begins now." Patel's eyes widened. "They've actually triggered the worst-case scenario." "They have." Way removed her formal outer robe. "And will respond accordingly." The verdict hadn't come as a surprise. Humanity's rapid technological advancement had been causing increasing alarm among the more conservative Federation species. The incident at Proxima Centauri, where a human experimental drive had accidentally created a temporary spatial distortion that disrupted a major trade route, had been the catalyst, but the underlying tensions had been building for decades. What the Federation couldn't know, was that humanity had been preparing for this possibility since their first contact with alien life. Earth's unified government had maintained a public face of eager cooperation, while quietly establishing contingency plans for scenarios ranging from invasion to the very exile they now faced. Operation Diaspora was the most comprehensive of these plans. Within hours of the Assembly's verdict, the encrypted signal reached every human settlement and vessel throughout Federation space. Instead of returning directly to Sol as expected, human ships made brief, seemingly random stops at uninhabited systems, collecting cached supplies and technology that had been strategically hidden over decades. On Earth, and throughout the Sol system, an entirely different level of preparation was underway. The massive generation ships that many Federation species had dismissed as inefficient curiosities were being rapidly finalized and loaded. These vessels, 37 in total, had been constructed in plain sight, officially described as long-term research platforms and deep space habitats. Beneath the icy crust of Europa, the true shipyards of humanity had been operating at full capacity for 50 years, hidden from Federation monitoring systems. Here, smaller but more advanced vessels were being completed, incorporating technologies that humans had developed in secret, some reverse-engineered from Federation science that they had officially failed to understand. 7 days after the verdict, the Federation Enforcement Division arrived at the edge of the Sol system, led by Commander Vexlar, a veteran of numerous peacekeeping operations. "Your cooperation is appreciated," Vexlar stated during the initial communication with Earth's Defense Minister Sophia Chen. The commander's facial tendrils twitched with obvious suspicion at the humans' apparent acceptance of their fate. "We respect the Federation's decision," Chen replied diplomatically. "All external human operations have been recalled to Sol as required." This was technically true. All officially registered human vessels had returned. The ships that now lurked in the shadows of distant Oort cloud objects, their stealth systems active, were not on any Federation registry. For the next 20 cycles, the Enforcement Division catalogued human population centers and technology, establishing preliminary boundary markers for the quarantine zone. Meanwhile, Earth's cities were gradually emptying as civilians were quietly transferred to the waiting ships. The Federation observers noted the population movement but interpreted it as resettlement within the system, a reasonable assumption given the circumstances. On the 35th cycle, Minister Chen invited Commander Vexlar to a formal reception on Luna, ostensibly to sign the final quarantine protocols. The commander arrived with a delegation of senior officers, none of whom noticed the unusually high number of transport ships moving between Earth and its moon. "Tomorrow, we will activate the barrier generators," Vexlar announced during the reception. "I wish to assure you that while you will be confined to this system, the Federation will maintain communication channels and limited trade options. This is not intended as a punishment, but a safeguard." Minister Chen raised her glass. "To new understandings," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That night, as the Federation delegation slept in their luxury accommodations on Luna, the final phase of Operation Diaspora began. The massive generation ships, hidden in the asteroid belt and beneath the lunar surface, powered up their systems. Simultaneously, the stealth fleet in the outer system activated their drives. None of these vessels used the conventional propulsion technology that the Federation expected. Instead, they employed a drive system based on principles that Federation science had explored but abandoned centuries ago, a path of research that humans had quietly pursued to its logical conclusion. By the time the Federation sensors detected the massive energy signatures the following morning, it was already too late. Commander Vexlar was awakened by urgent alerts as hundreds of ships throughout the Sol system simultaneously initiated departure sequences. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, establishing an emergency communication link with Minister Chen, who now appeared to be aboard one of the massive generation ships. "We're complying with your exile," Chen responded calmly. "You ordered humanity to remain within the Sol system. You didn't specify that all of humanity had to stay. Those vessels cannot possibly have the range to establish viable colonies," Vexlar stated, mandibles clicking in agitation. "This is suicide." Chen's smile was genuine this time. "The Federation has consistently underestimated human determination, Commander. Our ships don't need to reach Federation colonies because we're not going to Federation territory." One by one, the generation ships and their escort vessels activated their drives. Not the normal transition to superluminal travel that the Federation utilized, but something different. Each ship appeared to create a localized distortion before disappearing completely, leaving only rapidly fading energy signatures. "Impossible," whispered Vexlar's science officer. "That resembles theoretical fold space technology. They couldn't have perfected it. Our best minds abandoned that approach generations ago." Ambassador Wei's face appeared on the communication screen, transmitted from the last departing vessel. "The Federation has made its position clear, Commander. Humanity is not welcome in your community. So we'll build our own. The stars are countless, and your Federation claims less than 5% of this galaxy alone. The barrier will prevent any return," Vexlar warned. "Once established, the quarantine is absolute." "Then establish it with our blessing," Wei replied. "Perhaps in 700 cycles, when our sentence is complete, we'll return and see if the Federation has evolved beyond its fears." The final ship vanished, leaving the Enforcement Division to establish a quarantine around an effectively abandoned solar system. All that remained were automated stations, minimal infrastructure, and a small volunteer population who had chosen to stay behind as caretakers and as a facade for the Federation's benefit. Humanity hadn't fought the exile. They had transformed it from punishment into opportunity. And somewhere beyond Federation space, a new human civilization was about to emerge. The departure and the legacy. The diaspora fleet emerged from fold space in carefully mapped coordinates, arriving in clusters across a region spanning several hundred light years. This territory, designated Haven Sector in the diaspora plans, lay far beyond Federation boundaries in a sparse section of the Orion Arm that official surveys had dismissed as resource-poor and strategically unimportant. But humans had learned to thrive in environments that other species considered marginal. The first colony ship, Horizon, established orbit around a world they named Nouveau Terra, a blue-green planet with higher gravity than Earth, but otherwise remarkably hospitable. Captain Maria Oko stood on the observation deck, watching as the first shuttles descended to the surface, where survey teams were already constructing the initial settlement. Status report from the network, her executive officer reported. 33 colony vessels have successfully arrived at their designated systems. 3 are reporting minor drive fluctuations but have reached safe harbor. 1 remains unaccounted for. Oko nodded gravely. They had known there would be risks. The fold space drive was reliable but not perfect. Continue attempts to establish communication with the Artemis. Alert me immediately if they respond. Within days, the colonies began to take shape. The generation ships had been designed not just as transportation, but as orbital habitats and manufacturing centers, allowing the settlers to establish functional communities before fully committing to planetary living. On Nouveau Terra, Oko led the Colony Council's first meeting in a prefabricated structure that would eventually become a historical monument. We face 3 immediate priorities, she stated to the assembled leaders. First, establishing sustainable food production. Second, expanding our manufacturing capabilities. And third, extending our sensor network to monitor for any potential threats. Dr. Eliza Okafor, the colony's chief scientist, activated a holographic display. We've already confirmed that local flora can be safely processed as supplementary nutrition, and the preliminary growth tests for our earth crops show promising results. However, I'm more concerned about our technological independence. Explain, Ocho prompted. While we brought significant manufacturing capabilities and data archives, we were forced to leave behind certain specialized facilities. There are technologies we may not be able to replicate for a generation or more. This was the greatest risk of the diaspora, not the physical dangers of new worlds, but the potential for technological regression. Humanity had advanced rapidly within the Federation, partly by building upon existing alien technologies. Now they would need to rediscover some of those principles through their own research. We anticipated this, responded Dr. Xiang Wei, head of the Technology Preservation Directorate and cousin to Ambassador Wei. Each colony receives specific portions of our technological base, with redundancies built into the network. By maintaining communication between settlements, we can preserve the full spectrum of our knowledge. 6 months after the initial landing, the first intercolony communication network was established, allowing real-time contact between the scattered human settlements. The reports from each world created a mosaic of challenges and triumphs. Unexpected environmental obstacles on some planets, surprising resource discoveries on others. Meanwhile, at the edge of Haven Sector, the explorer vessel Magellan made an unexpected discovery. Captain Tariq Hassan stared at the sensor readings in disbelief before contacting Nouveau Terra. We've encountered an artificial structure, he reported to the Colony Council. It appears to be a monitoring station of non-Federation design. The revelation sent ripples of concern throughout the colonies. They had chosen this region specifically because it lay outside the Federation's sphere of influence. The presence of unknown technology suggested they were not as alone as they had believed. After days of careful observation and analysis, The Magellan initiated contact using universal mathematical sequences. The response came not from the station, but from a vessel that suddenly appeared nearby. A sleek ship of unfamiliar configuration. "Greetings, newcomers," came the transmission, the speaker using a translation algorithm that struggled with human language patterns. "We are the Viridian Compact. Your arrival has been noted with interest." The Viridians, they soon learned, were a coalition of 11 spacefaring species who had rejected Federation membership centuries earlier. Their territory bordered Haven Sector, though they maintained a policy of minimal expansion and maximum self-sufficiency, a philosophy that had allowed them to avoid conflicts with the larger galactic powers. "We observed your exodus," the Viridian representative explained during the first formal diplomatic meeting. "Few species have the courage to reject Federation assimilation so completely. Fewer still have the technology to achieve what you have done." The revelation that humanity's departure had been observed by non-Federation eyes was unsettling, but it also presented unexpected opportunities. The Viridians had technologies that followed different development paths than those of the Federation, approaches that complemented human innovations in surprising ways. Within 2 years of the diaspora, humanity had established a tentative alliance with the Viridian Compact. Trade began cautiously, then expanded as mutual benefits became clear. Human fold space drive technology was of particular interest to the Viridians, who offered their advanced ecological engineering knowledge in exchange. Meanwhile, back in Federation space, the consequences of humanity's departure were beginning to manifest. The quarantine barrier around Sol functioned perfectly, preventing any entry or exit. What the Federation hadn't anticipated was how deeply integrated humans had become in their economy and research institutions. The quantum communication network, primarily developed by human scientists, though officially a collaborative project, began experiencing cascading failures without the specialists who had designed it. Several Federation research initiatives stalled without their human contributors, whose unique approach to problem-solving had often provided breakthrough insights. High Counselor Trigax faced increasing criticism from member species who had opposed the exile. The humans were contained because they were unpredictable and potentially dangerous, he maintained during a contentious assembly session. "Their departure merely confirms the wisdom of our decision." "Their departure," countered the Nelveric representative, "has revealed our dependence. We have lost access to innovations that were enhancing lives across the Federation. The humans did not merely accept our punishment, they rendered it irrelevant." Unknown to the Federation, limited observation of their former territory was still possible for humanity. The volunteer population remaining in Sol maintained a facade of compliance while operating sophisticated stealth monitoring systems. Through these channels, reports of the Federation's technological challenges reached the colonies, confirming what many had predicted. 5 years after the diaspora, humanity's colonies were thriving beyond most optimistic projections. The fold space drive had been refined further, allowing more efficient travel between settlements. The alliance with the Viridian Compact had expanded to include cultural exchanges and joint defense protocols. And on Nouveau Terra, the discovery of unique mineral compounds was enabling technological applications that would have been impossible on Earth. In a quiet chamber beneath the now permanent colony administration building, Captain Oko, now Governor Oko, met with representatives from all 36 successful colonies. The Artemis had eventually been found, its crew having survived a problematic arrival by establishing their settlement on a moon rather than their intended planet. "We've received a communication from Sol," she announced. "The Federation has officially requested dialogue with the remaining human population. They're offering to reconsider the terms of quarantine in exchange for technical assistance." Dr. Wei laughed softly. 5 years. I wagered it would take them at least 10 to admit they needed us. What should our response be?" asked the representative from Proxima Colony, the smallest of the settlements. Oko's expression was thoughtful. "No response for now. Let them wonder. Let them search the stars and question their assumptions. Humanity has found its path forward, and it doesn't lead back to the Federation. at least not as supplicants. She stood and moved to the window, looking out at the thriving city that had risen from wilderness. Construction drones swarmed around a new research facility, while children played in parks designed with both Earth aesthetics and local botany. When we do return to Federation space, and eventually we will, it won't be as a chastened child seeking forgiveness, she continued. It will be as equals, with technologies and perspectives they've never imagined. Outside, the alien sun set on a world that was becoming increasingly less alien with each passing day. Humanity hadn't fought exile. They had embraced it, transformed it, and in doing so, had found not an ending but a beginning. In the vastness of space, their ships continued to explore beyond Haven Sector, mapping routes unknown to the Federation, discovering resources untapped by the Viridians, and always pushing onward. The stars that had once seemed distant and unreachable now represented unlimited potential.